Today, we're going to unravel a fascinating story. It's about how one single election in Argentina sent massive shockwaves through Wall Street and, almost overnight, ignited a political firestorm right in the heart of Washington, D.C. It's quite a chain reaction. So, how in the world are all these things connected, right? A South American election, a stock market boom, and a political brawl in the U.S. That's the big question we're going to break down today, and we'll trace the whole wild path from start to finish.
All right, let's kick things off in Argentina. To really get what happened, you have to understand just how tense things were there right before this crucial election. The country's economy was, and I mean this literally, on a knife's edge.
So the heart of the problem was this. Argentina's central bank was just bleeding US dollars. And those dollars are absolutely essential for backing their own currency, the peso. As those dollar reserves dwindled, so did everyone's confidence in the economy. This created the perfect storm for what's called a currency run. In fact, one had already kind of started after President Milei's party did poorly in a local election. You had people rushing to dump their pesos and grab US dollars, basically fearing the whole thing was about to collapse. And you want to talk about high stakes? US President Trump put it in no uncertain terms. He basically said that any potential financial help from the US was completely dependent on Milei's party winning these elections. It was a massive political gamble, with everything on the line.
And then the election happened. And wow, the results were a total shock. It defied all the expectations, and it triggered an absolutely euphoric, almost manic reaction from the financial markets.
See, against all the odds, Milei's coalition managed to win just enough seats to shield his pro-market economic reforms from being blocked. For investors who are watching this with bated breath, this was the ultimate green light. The market's reaction was immediate and, honestly, explosive. Argentina's main stock index, the Merval, just skyrocketed 22%. That was its biggest single-day gain in almost 2 years. And that optimism wasn't just in stocks. It spilled right over into the bond market. A key government bond jumped 11 cents on the dollar. Now, that might not sound like much, but in the world of bonds, that is a huge vote of confidence from global investors. And get this, even the peso, the currency that everyone was panicking about, it rallied. It strengthened by 4% against the dollar in a single day. For just a moment there, it really seemed like the crisis was over. You know, this quote from an investment manager really sums it all up perfectly. The perception just flipped overnight. President Milei went from fighting for survival to suddenly being in the driver's seat. So, with this huge victory in his back pocket, Milei unlocked the next crucial piece of this puzzle, a massive financial lifeline from Washington. Now, this wasn't just a simple check. It was a really complex, multi-part plan. We're talking about billions in currency swaps, loan facilities set up with big U.S. banks, and even the U.S. Treasury stepping in to directly buy up pesos to support their value. All in all, it was a lifeline worth tens of billions of dollars. So you might be asking, why would the U.S. go to all this trouble? Well, the Trump administration framed it as a strategic move. The idea was that this aid would help counter China's growing influence in South America, which was a major foreign policy goal for them. But here's the thing about that kind of market euphoria. It often doesn't last. And in this case, the good times were really short-lived. That bailout just couldn't fix the deep, fundamental problems. And reality came roaring back. I mean, just look at this roller coaster ride the peso went on. On Monday, after the election, it soared by as much as 10%. But by Tuesday, it was falling again, wiping out nearly all of those gains. The post-election party lasted less than 48 hours. Because at the end of the day, all that money didn't fix the core issue. Most analysts and the market quickly realized the peso was still way overvalued. The U.S. support was basically a band-aid, not a cure. Another painful devaluation seemed pretty much inevitable. And this is where our story takes its most dramatic and unexpected turn. This is where the lifeline to Argentina sparks that political firestorm, right back in the United States. Okay, so here's the absolute heart of the controversy. On one hand, you have the U.S. government sending billions to prop up Argentina. But at the exact same time, American soybean farmers were getting crushed by the trade war with China. And guess who China started buying more soybeans from? Argentina. To add insult to injury, the administration then announced a plan to quadruple beef imports from Argentina, a move that American cattle ranchers called a complete betrayal. Now, to be fair, there was a reason for the beef import idea. Prices at home were getting really high, with beef costs jumping 15% in just the last year. But the proposed solution, to import more from a direct competitor, absolutely infuriated the very American producers the administration claimed to be championing. And the criticism wasn't just coming from political opponents. Listen to this from Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was a staunch ally of the president. She called it a punch in the gut to American ranchers. That shows you just how deep the anger was over what many saw as a total betrayal of the whole America First agenda. The political backlash in Washington was swift, and it came from all sides. You had Democrats introducing bills to block the aid, critics on both sides questioning the timing, doing this during a U.S. government shutdown, and even farm state Republicans begging the president to support American producers instead. So what we're left with is this incredibly complex web of global finance, domestic politics, and just plain old unintended consequences. And it really leaves you with a huge question about this America First approach. Is it a pragmatic model for advancing U.S. interests around the world? Or is it a warning sign of a chaotic policy that can end up hurting the very people it promises to protect?